Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship Podcast. I'm Chip Brown of Horns247.com. Joined as always by my esteemed, affable, co-chairman of the Florida Bureau of Tourism and proud graduate of Tampa Catholic High School, the one and only Eric Henry of 24/7 Sports. Eric, how you doing, man?
Chip, I am doing good, man. Cannot complain. It's another beautiful day. To quote the great Butch Davis, who I covered for many years down there at FIU, I'm on the right side of the graph, Chip. That is always the positive way to start the day. Also, a re-welcome to those of you who typically would watch us on Facebook. Finally got Facebook reconnected, and special announcement here, a little drum roll here. We're working on getting Instagram connected as well. So
come on,
Horns247 on Instagram.
Come on
the gram. As soon as we get that connected, hopefully next week you'll just be able to pop up live the same way it would pop up on Facebook and otherwise. So, Chip, we're making our way through the socials here for the Flagship Podcast.
Making our way in the world today, given everything we've got. I think that was the opening line of Cheers. But anyway, Eric, it is Masters Week, and Texas Longhorn Scotty Scheffler is the odds-on favorite to win it. He just held his champions dinner, actually, on Tuesday night at the Augusta National Golf Club, if you will. Are you a golf fan, follower, observer?
You know, it's interesting, Chip. So I'll make this quick. My golf fandom interest, I mean, I don't think this is too much of a controversial thing to say. When I was a kid, when Tiger Woods came on the scene, the great Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods.
That got a lot of young black kids into golfing. And my mom was like, listen, you're going to take golf lessons, right? So as a young kid, Chip, like 96, 97, I'm like, 5, 6, 7 years old. Took up golf lessons. So I still can swing the clubs reasonably well. But I can't say that my golf fandom, probably the peak of my golf fandom is the, early to mid 2000s when I'm still like early teenage years. Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson, Sergio Garcia, Vijay Singh. The list goes on, right? Of just golfers of guys trying to compete in the field with Tiger Woods. Listen, if the Masters, that's the key for me, right? The Masters is like the Super Bowl. It's like the finals. It's like the World Series. You got to watch, right? Masters, U.S. Open, things like that. So those are the ones that really get me.
Yeah. Jordan Spieth, Masters champion for the Longhorns. Always interesting. Jordan Spieth. I was lucky enough to go to the Masters several times and saw every shot live in person of Jordan Spieth winning the 2015 Masters. And then 2016, we all know he was in the lead, he was cruising, and then he got to hole number 10, the double dunk, and he's never challenged there again, really. So we'll see. That was 10 years ago that Jordan Spieth won, which is amazing. Where does the time go, Eric? Okay, all right. We're here. We're Flagship Podcasting, and we've got spring football to talk about. We'll talk some Texas baseball. We'll talk some Texas basketball. Trey Johnson, shocker, declaring for the NBA draft. We'll get into all of it. And yes, you see the little banner there. 50% off becoming an annual member. That's pennies, folks. And we're giving you scoop all the time. Breaking the stories, giving you the insight. You get Eric Henry's 4 Downs column. You get the Insider. You get the Stampede, which is the greatest collection of recruiting intel every week. So make sure you don't get left behind and become an annual member at Horns 24/7. All right, Eric, we got to talk to Steve Sarkisian, new father Steve Sarkisian. He's got a son named Amyas. 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 Which is interesting because his other kids are named Brady, Jordan, and Taylor, I think. So maybe L'Oreal named their new little bundle of joy. But Eric, and you're looking down like you're disinterested in this conversation, so we'll move it to football.
No, thank you, Chip, for just outing me on a live stream. It wasn't that I that was disinterested in the conversation. I didn't realize it was a boy. I just want to try to verify that.
Oh.
I thought it was a girl. You could be dead right.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to verify, Chip.
Okay. Proud new little bundle of joy.
Yeah.
We'll just call Amyas a proud new bundle of joy. I thought I read that somewhere, or heard that from, I don't know. Anyway, let's move on to the football. Steve Sarkisian. We're about the midpoint of spring football, Eric. And Steve Sarkisian talked about everything from Arch Manning to, the receiver position where Ryan Wingo and DeAndre Moore have been banged up and not a part of things. So a lot of younger guys getting a chance. He even mentioned Dalen McCutcheon, who's a name that I've heard as a guy who's turning some heads there. But the tight end position is hurting because Jordan Washington has a broken collarbone, which takes about 8 weeks to recover from. And so he's pretty much done for spring football. And tight end is a position where a bunch of dudes just walked out the door, including the single season record holder for receptions and receiving yards, Gunnar Helm. On defense, I think there's some excitement about the linebacker position and the secondary, but, defensive tackle, they're trying to get some things figured out. And Steve Sarkisian, as part of his discussion about those defensive tackles, revealed that Travis Shaw's had a knee that has bothered him throughout his college career, Eric. So they've limited him. That was a gulp moment. Your thoughts?
All right, Chip, just to clean up that that little bit there, as you can tell, I am on the Texas Longhorn beat, not the Steve Sarkisian, L'Oreal Sarkisian personal life beat. It is a boy. So Chip was correct the first time. That shows you that I had no, wasn't my beat. So just to clear that up for the sake of accuracy. All right, let's work through some of the things you talked about there, right? We'll get into the tight end position a little bit and take it or leave it. But my initial thoughts when, I guess we could start with receiver. Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore banged up a little bit. I do agree with what Steve Sarkisian said, right? And that more or less, I think, even though Ryan Wingo's only been in the program 1 year, you feel confident you know what you have in Ryan Wingo, right? Now, of course, the spring is a crucial time for guys to build on, especially a freshman entering a sophomore year, right? I mean, look no further than and Anthony Hill Jr., for example, right? The leap he made from year 1 to year 2 that starts in the spring. Sure, it is crucial. But with that being said, yes, you feel confident what you have in Ryan Wingo and DeAndre Moore too. Chip is someone who, while he, was a second-year player last year, first real year in the starting lineup, first real year getting significant playing time. So this is a crucial time for him to build on some things. But I think Demo, when you hear the way that his teammates talk about him, right, and the way that Steve Sarkisian's talked about him as a professional, kind of that, not just in role on the field, but off the field, assuming that Jordan Whittington type of role, right? So you feel confident in his ability that he's going to be fine to continue developing despite being banged up. Jordan Washington is another one. You talking about a second-year guy now, so who didn't play a ton. It'd be interesting to see how the time missed, if it is the entire spring. When we spoke with Steve, it didn't seem as if it would be the entire spring, but also didn't say it wouldn't be. It seemed like to just kind of keep an eye on it, right? If he can get back out there, and we'll save some of that for take or leave it in terms of whether that's a position of need in the portal. I'm sure you'll bring that up because Steve Sarkisian did address his kind of thoughts on the portal there. So I'm sure you'll bring it up in a second. Going to the defensive side of the ball. Yeah, I guess you take a look at Travis Shaw with the knee injury. That's always a little gives you a little pause, Chip, right? When you talk about a big guy, Travis Shaw, I do have my roster right here. Travis came to 350, right? Like I think even higher than his North Carolina weight. 350, yeah, 6'5", 350 is the listed weight there. So of course, a big man, that type of mass, that type of size, and knee, that can cause issue. Go ask Joel Embiid, right? And I'm not saying Travis Shaw is Joel Embiid, but he's been struggling with a knee since he was seemingly 16 years old. So you get the point I am making there. So that's certainly something to keep an eye on. Chip, again, I think my biggest takeaway is what I wrote yesterday on the site. Go check it out, horns247.com, is despite the fact that some of these guys are banged up, I think the spring, at least this is what I kind of took away from Steve, sure, they are light at some spots. He said it himself, the numbers at receiver, numbers at tight end, in terms of scholarship guys that they have active right now in participating in spring practice, not necessarily what you would like, but I still think that this is an opportunity for all of the underclassmen, Chip, right? How long have Texas fans and us kind of speculated about saying, hey, when are some of these young guys going to get an opportunity, right? The vets. It's always the vets who end up winning out in the end. Well, this is their opportunity, Chip. This is a roster filled with underclassmen who are talented. Texas has recruited well, not just certain positions, recruited the entire roster well, who are looking for an opportunity. This is now their opportunity. That's the biggest takeaway I take from all of this, Chip, in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, one reason to become a member at Horns247 is that we give you the inside scoop, which is the fact that there have been a couple more injuries than just what Steve Sarkisian reported. Justice Terry has missed time with a hamstring. Justice Terry, the freshman defensive tackle who is from the state of Georgia, top 5-star player. And Brad Spence, the linebacker transfer from Arkansas, has missed some time as well with while recovering from a previous injury. So in addition to the injuries we've already mentioned, those are a couple. So it's been a let's just say this, a lot of opportunity for others at the tight end position. Amari Winston. Hell, there's a guy named Ridge Barker who I've heard has made some plays. Tight end, 6'4", 250 from Lovejoy, same high school as Dalen McCutcheon, coached by Todd Dodge last year. So, who knows? We know the Michael Taft story. It's amazing. Not sure we're ready to crown anyone. And another guy, Rhett Anderson, wide receiver, 5'11", 187 from Alamo Heights. Heard he's made some plays. Now, some of this is when you're into the 3s versus 3s at spring practice, but they are on one field. So when you make a play, the whole team's watching you. It's been an interesting spring, and it feels, Steve Sarkisian said yesterday, we're doing a lot of teaching because you've got so many new coaches, and the coaches are getting on the same page in how they're going to teach all the players. And then you've got 27 newcomers, as we've mentioned previously, a record 22 mid-year freshman enrollees. So it doesn't feel like a finished product at all, Eric, more so than in previous years, for sure. You got 4 new starters on the offensive line. You had 5 big-time playmakers at defensive tackle who just walked out the door. And before they walked out the door, you had some of the younger guys like Sadir Mitchell and Aaron Bryant walk out the door. By the way, I hear Sadir Mitchell's doing well at LSU, even though Bo Davis left to go to the Saints, which is a little bit, frustrating. But anyway, so, you've got a couple positions where they're seemingly pretty good in the secondary. They got a lot of guys at running back. CJ Baxter's not all the way back yet from his knee injury. But they have guys. They got Quintravian Wisner. They got, Jarek Gibson and Christian Clark, who's recovered from his Achilles injury, which is amazing. So it feels different, doesn't it, Eric?
Yeah. No, I think it does. One of the things that I guess I kind of talk about, and before I get to that point, to everyone watching on YouTube, Chris Bennett, James Cox, appreciate you rocking with us this early in the morning here watching the Flagship. Where I think it feels interesting, Chip, is, and I would be curious your thoughts on this before we move on. I think every year there's a spot or two that, for example, last year you could look at defensive tackle, right? It's like, we feel if we can get X from this position and these transfers, we're good, right? But it's an if. It's not necessarily we know we're going to get X, right? I think you can have that at a position or two. What I do find really interesting is I think you can make the argument that despite what we think we know about Arch Manning, whether it's quarterback, even to an extent running back, because you have an if there with CJ Baxter's injury and how he's going to recover. Receiver, kind of an if there with some of the younger guys and how are they going to fare. Tight end, we've talked about that. Offensive line, we'll talk about that, right? Defensive tackle, you still have a kind of like a if we can get this. I'm not painting that in a negative light because, again, we know we're talking about talented players, and I personally feel confident that this coaching staff will be able to get those guys to play to whatever their 2025 ceiling is, because obviously some of these guys are underclassmen, right? What their ceiling is in 2025 may not be what it is in 26, in 27, so on and so forth, right? But if they can get these guys to play to the best of their capabilities for what they, kind of where they are in their career at 2025, I still feel confident about this group, again, making another college ball playoff and so on and so forth. But, Chip, I'll pass it back to you on this, and you let me know if you think I'm being a little alarmist. I do think at this point in the spring, and that's why Steve said, hey, this is the teaching time, but it's still an if with a lot of these guys. It's not walking in like you did last year where you felt like, all right, we got known commodity at quarterback, known commodity at receiver, known commodity at tight end, offensive line, so on and so forth. So that does feel a little bit different, but fair to frame it that way, Chip. Is that fair?
Yeah. And I think this is a big time coaching year because of everything you said. I mean, it's not guys who've been in the program for now. On the offensive line, there are guys who've been in the program 3 years, 4 years, who may not have been starters in the past season, but have a lot of experience, have a lot of trust with their teammates and their coaches already. But yeah, I mean, at defensive tackle, it's a blank slate in a lot of ways. I mean, you got Alex January, who played under 100 snaps last year as the only returning Longhorn with game experience. And that is, as I talk about all the time, that is the gold bullion position of the defense. If you don't have those guys, you don't have much of a chance because you got to stop the run. And so I do think that they will hit the portal for at least one defensive tackle, if not two more, once the portal window opens April 16th. That is 7 days from today, Eric. So that will be an interesting time for Texas football. Okay, Arch Manning. Everybody wants to know what's going on with Arch Manning. Arch Manning, the newest pitch man for Viore Athletic Wear. He and Livy Dunn now are Viore spokesmodels, I guess we call them, in addition to his Red Bull and his Waymo commercials. So Arch doing well in the NIL game. But it was funny. Steve Sarkisian was asked about Arch Manning, and Steve Sarkisian said, yeah, he's got to get ready for the boos. The boos are coming. Thought that was interesting. I thought it was a reality, nice cup of reality, Eric. What'd you think about that?
No, Chip, I 1000% agree, right? I thought this even going back to last year that, this isn't just unique to Texas fans. This is football, right? The backup quarterback is always the most popular person in town. I mean, that just is what it is, right? And inevitably, at some point, there may be, I shouldn't say inevitably. Let me take a step back. I like that Steve Sarkisian is preparing what could be a reality in that there will be boos, right? That could happen. What could happen, Chip, on the flip side is he could take over college football like Johnny Manziel did, back in, I guess I shouldn't reference an Aggie on this show, but I just remember someone who was, a virtual no-name who comes in and just lights the world on fire, can do no wrong, right? That may very well be the case, but that can't be the expectation, Chip, right? And that's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. That we're talking about a kid who came in against UTSA when Quinn Ewers got banged up, and the next week he was the favorite for the Heisman Trophy, right? Like, there has to be somewhat of a mid ground in between that, and that's what I liked. Maybe "like" is the wrong word, but that's what I took away from Steve's comment there. Is listen, he could go to Ohio State and throw 3 picks. It could happen. Likely, who knows? But it could happen, and we got to be able to kind of lay that foundation. If you're Steve Sarkisian, the program, that it might not all be sunshine and roses, right? So yeah, I thought that was very shrewd and a nice slice of reality from Steve Sarkisian.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the offense, there are a lot of question marks. Arch Manning doesn't have the proven weapons that Quinn Ewers had each of the last 2 years. Quinn had Worthy and A.D. Mitchell in 23. He had Matt Golden and Isaiah Bond and Gunnar Helm in 24. Those are guys who put it in the books already. Gunnar Helm obviously exploded in 2024 and probably was Quinn Ewers' favorite target, honestly. And Matt Golden emerged as the season went on, and I thought it was interesting. Steve Sarkisian said yesterday that Matt Golden, didn't feel like he had all the answers with the offense, sought Steve Sarkisian out. And Steve Sarkisian said he got better as the year went on. You probably saw the best of Matt Golden over the second half of the season. Well, think about where these receivers are now. You got Ryan Wingo, you've got DeAndre Moore. They're both out for the spring. So Arch Manning's developing all this new rapport with a bunch of new receivers. The Michael Terry, Jamie French, Khalil Lockett, Aaron Butler, Parker Livingstone, Dalen McCutcheon from Lovejoy. So it's a lot. But the good news is Arch Manning's in his 3rd year in the program and has built up some respect, some clout, some voice as a leader. So just keep that in mind, folks, as you plan your Arch Manning Heisman ceremony, that this guy's having to lead a lot of new faces. And there are guys he's practiced with the last couple of years, like on the offensive line. Neto Umazulu, Cole Hudson, Brandon Baker, Trevor Gooseby. These are guys that Arch Manning lined up with the second team offense, who are now all ascending together. So that's a plus. But they've got to develop their own rhythm and chemistry, and they won't know what they're really made of until they face adversity, which they will face in week 1, August 30th in Columbus, Ohio, the Snake Pit against the Ohio State Buckeyes. So, Eric, other thoughts? One thing that stood out to me was the talent in the secondary. You've got, everyone feels good about Jelani McDonald. Michael Taft is a second team All-American. You got Derek Williams, who's not all the way back yet from his knee injury, but was a big-time playmaker at safety for Texas last year, coming back. And Xavier Filsaime is getting a lot of good buzz. You don't even have Jonah Williams as a part of this team yet. He'll really take up with this team after baseball. At corner, you've got Manny Muhammad. You got Jalen Gilbo now playing outside corner. And I'm told he had an interception of Arch Manning in last Thursday night's scrimmage. You've got guys who waited their turn. Warren Roberson, who's having a really good spring. You got guys like Santana Wilson who've made plays at corner, and Cade Phillips. Okay, I'm hearing from enough people that Cade Phillips is the next. So I'm going with that. That's my guy, Cade Phillips, number 11. Long, strong, playmaker. Cade Phillips. Put that name down, kids. Eric, any other things that stood out to you from Steve Sarkisian?
I'll go back to what you talked about a second ago with receiver, because my ears perked up. I found it super interesting, Chip, when the question was asked about Matt Golden and kind of him talking about, his development or Steve Sarkisian. This would now be the second year in a row, Chip, that there was a transfer receiver with a lot of starting experience, a very talented transfer receiver with a lot of starting experience, who seemingly took a little while for them to catch their footing, to kind of, really grasp what they're trying to do. Because last year, Steve said the same thing about A.D. Mitchell, even in fall camp. I don't want to try and quote him verbatim, but the gist of it was, hey, it took A.D. a little while to kind of, figure out, how we do things around here in reference to the offense, right? And we all saw that A.D. Mitchell's play came up huge. First off, A.D. had seemingly, I don't want to say a better rapport, but if you remember, his numbers kind of picked up a little bit when Quinn Ewers went out. Right? For whatever reason, Malik Murphy had a little more comfort level going to him as opposed to Xavier Worthy. That may have been, kind of what the coverage dictated, so on and so forth. But there's that. But AD's numbers kind of picked up down the stretch, and he ended up being a valuable contributor. And we all know, turned to a first-round pick, right? You can kind of look at the same thing with Matt Golden, right? Where, Matt maybe emerged a little bit sooner than second half of the season. Maybe, kind of once you got that first quarter of the season, maybe he kind of emerged as the guy. But I found that super interesting, Chip, because you spinning it forward, when I think you talk about Texas's ability or willingness to take a transfer receiver here, that's something I'm keeping an eye on, right? That just like, for example, Amari Niblack last year, this offense isn't seemingly just as simple as, some guys, hey, you're going to run the route 6, right? Here's a route tree. You're running 6, you're running 8, run it at this depth, kind of, break it off here. All right, cool. There's the option, break it off here. Go play, right? It's not seemingly that simple. Obviously for those men, I know I'm kind of talking about an air raid offense in which like everything's just on the number system, right? You just use those numbers. That's what you do. There you go. That to me speaks that it might not be that simple for us to plug and play a transfer receiver, right? So there's that aspect of it. The second thing to kind of touch on what you talked about with the secondary, I thought Jalen Gilbo playing outside exclusively was pretty interesting, right? Because as best I understand it, Chip, again, you saw Gilbo's 2022 season, 2022, before he got banged up, right, and Jody Barron came in. I've only known Jalen Gilbo to play star, right? So if this staff thinks he has the ability to flip outside and play corner, that should give them a little bit of depth. I think it should speak to maybe where Steve Sarkisian feels about the depth at corner on this roster, that they feel the need to flip him, because we know how important the star position is in this defense. Steve is referred to as kind of the glue guy, right? You tie the front end and back end together, and we know how valuable Jade Barron was playing star when he did for his first few years at Texas, right? So that to me is interesting because that does it then become like, you know, a Ryan Niblett or some of the other guys, Kobe Black or others that maybe have practiced at Star. So I find that interesting, Chip.
Yeah. And right now you've got, you know, at Star, they know Jordan Johnson Rubel can play it. They're giving Wardell Mack a lot of run at Star. Ryan Niblett, as you mentioned, the receiver turned running back, turned defensive back, and possibly return man this year. And Grayson Littleton, who's also getting a look at Star. And Grayson Littleton is the sort of unsung defensive back out of Tampa, Florida, Wiregrass Ranch. What do you think of Wiregrass Ranch High School, Eric? Is that a football factory?
My old high school coach, Mark Canner, would be upset if I did not call his program a football factory. So no, to answer your question seriously, that area, Chip, it's kind of, I don't know what would be analogous here in Austin, but it's one of those suburbs to where like over the last 10 years, it's exploded. And you now are seeing a lot of talent come out of there because initially that area wasn't much of anything, right? But shout out to Mark Canner, the head coach of Wiregrass Ranch. Rocco Becht, Chip, a Wiregrass Ranch product, of course, current Iowa State quarterback. So that should give you an example that they're now putting guys in big time spots.
Okay. Got to check in with our Florida Bureau of Tourism, you know, make sure we're getting our proper Florida high school football intel from my man, Eric Henry. Okay. So that covers a lot of ground with Texas spring football, trying to make sure that we're not leaving anything out. I would say, Trey Owens and KJ Lacey. Eric Henry has done a fine job of illuminating the facts. So is our man, Chris Bennett, CB, the world's greatest volunteer producer in the history of radio.
No doubt about it.
About all the years that Texas has needed the second, the backup quarterback, that the starting quarterback has not made it through the season unscathed, including the last 5, I believe. My man CB probably has that set up, but the list is long. Let's put it that way. And I'm hearing Trey Owens just solid. Ball gets out on time and on target. Big, strong guy. And then KJ Lacey, who we got to see a little bit of, Eric. There he is. Flash that up there, Eric.
We'll throw it up there. There we go. There is.
CB, he's always got it for us. Let's see, 24, 23, 20. Yeah. So the last 5 years, Texas has had to play a backup quarterback because the starter was injured. So you got Trey Owens. No one ever talks about Trey Owens, but he's just solid. And then KJ Lacey, the bullet-armed quarterback, 6 foot, 182 pounds, but a rocket arm.
Can I make a quick point on KJ Lacey? Because I think you and I talked about this. To your eye, it looks like, man, who's this little guy out there playing quarterback, right? And then you got to remind yourself he's standing next to legit 6'5", 6'6" guys. So but I just wanted to make the point, Chip, and I'm sure you'd agree. The ball jumps off his arm, like he can sling. Don't let the size fool you there. He can throw the rock.
Yeah, I mean, I know Michael Vick. Michael Vick is a unicorn. Like right. No one's Michael Vick. Michael Vick was just a pocket rocket. But he reminds you a little bit of that because he's may not have the stature, but the arm, as Eric said, it is a live arm. The ball comes screaming off of his hands. So he's got that arm strength. What's your level of concern at running back, Eric, with CJ Baxter still working his way back in?
I'm not truly concerned, but maybe that's because of how I went into the spring viewing this, Chip, those are major injuries. What Christian Clark is doing, and I think Steve kind of alluded to it, right? He said, what is the timeline now? Or like, I can't go into verbatim, but basically was saying, like, I don't know what the standard timeline is with modern medicine, right? What Christian Clark is doing is not normal. So let's put that out there right now. So
an Achilles injury used to be at least 9 months.
That would sideline dudes for 9 months plus the next year they had to find their footing, right?
Yeah, it used to be a career-ending injury, but
there you go. So I mean, I remember I'm trying to think most notable Achilles. I mean, Kevin Durant, right, was an Achilles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there Kobe. You go. And that goes to show the advancements there. Anyhow, back to Texas football. My expectation was that coming off an Achilles, CJ Baxter with a knee, that these guys maybe wouldn't be here for spring, right? So anything that Christian Clark is able to give now, that's just extra for me personally. CJ Baxter, the fact that he's not a full participant, not stunned. So I don't necessarily have a true level of concern. If we were in fall camp and CJ was still kind of all right, he's still in the the non-contact jersey and Christian Clark were kind of slowly recovering, then I'd be like, okay, let's see kind of what's there, because you have Trey Wisner, Trayvon Wisner, 1,000-yard rusher last year, Jarrett Gibson, then obviously the underclassmen freshman talents, James Simon, Ricky Stewart. But it's spring, I'm interested to see how CJ kind of not necessarily recovers, but how quickly he can get back up to speed. Because again, I think while, players are recovering from injuries much quicker, the mental hurdle, Chip, is what I am genuinely curious of, right? We were talking about a player, both of these guys were in unique stages of their career in which they were growing and developing, right? We're not talking about Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley, excuse me. I want to say Savion Red there for a second. A Saquon Barkley tearing his ACL, someone who's already established, and it's like, all right, you know what you can do. These are guys who are still trying to find their footing. So that to me is the interesting part. And I guess you know what, Chip? We can acknowledge it now, and then maybe come back to it. Our guy CB, greatest producer, said Rory Harmon announced that she's coming back to the 40 acres. So we'll touch on that a little bit in basketball, Chip.
Yeah. I'm just sending that signal to Hank.
Sure.
Right now.
Yeah, while Chip does that, I mean, for just anyone who didn't know, Rory, you only really had 48 hours from the time that game ended because the timeline to enter the WNBA draft is so quick. So she clearly made her decision, is now ready to announce it. And I'll just quickly make this point for kind of jump back on the timeline. I will see, when we hear from Rory what the decision was. But if it were strictly financial, I tweeted this out. The starting salary for the number one pick in the WNBA draft is $78,000. Okay. So I think the fine folks, the NIL folks at Texas could make Rory an offer to come back. But anyhow, Chip, we'll let you bring it back to football.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got a long way to go. Everyone's crowning Texas as a national championship contender. And I think Texas could get there. But they're not there. They're not anywhere near that right now. And in fact, I don't feel comfortable making any kind of way too early predictions about Texas until we see what the roster is after the portal window, because I think Texas needs help, especially on the defensive tackle. And so, I think Jordan Washington's a good player. I think Spencer Shannon's a good player. Is the tight end position going to be anywhere close to what it was last year? No. Now I could be shocked and blown away. And we should mention Amari Winston is a guy who is getting some pretty consistent praise for his consistency, honestly. For a 6'1", 246-pound tight end who looks more like a fullback, the guy can run. He's got good hands. And he's tough. So who knows? File that name away as well. Amari Winston. And then, at linebacker, man, you're loaded. At edge, you're loaded. At linebacker, you got Anthony Hill. You got, you're going to have Brad Spence. You've got Trey Moore playing 3 different positions. He's playing weak side linebacker. He's playing strong side linebacker. He's an edge rusher. That's a lot of pass rush talent, Eric. When you look at Colin Simmons Anthony Hill, Ethan Burke, Trey Moore, Brad Spence rushed the passer last year at Arkansas, had 6 sacks, I think. So that part of it you feel good about. Plus, you got if Colton Vasek is okay after this shoulder surgery and can stay on the field, that guy's a really good strong side defensive end. So you're replacing Baron Sorrell with Ethan Burke and Colton Vasek, ideally. And then you got Lance Jackson coming on, the freshman who's already a grown-ass man. Lance Jackson is 6'5", 258. So you feel good about that position. And linebacker, in my mind. What would you say are the strongest positions right now?
Yeah, Chip. It's funny because we did this for a roundtable last week, and I saw some of the responses who kind of felt otherwise about certain positions. I don't want to say it's clear and far away that it's linebacker, Chip, but listen, for a defense, and this is just today's modern football. You're in a lot of 4-2-5 looks with the star and whatnot, and the way teams spread you out. You could do a lot worse than starting your pair of linebackers, starting with Anthony Hill, who's going to be an All-American, and Leongo Lafau, who is probably in line for, I don't want to set the bar too high, but he's in for a jump. He's due for a jump from last year to this, right? You could start a lot worse than that. Then you tell me I get a Brad Spence, right, who is certainly a very capable linebacker guy, started 4 games at Arkansas last year, but is a growing talent. You tell me that I'm going to mix in a little bit of Trey Moore there in terms of, that rush end / Chip, I'll be interested to see if Trey is capable of playing that third linebacker spot, right? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. I'm going to say I don't know, because that spot doesn't necessarily, I guess I should let the audience know, that third linebacker spot that David Benda or others play, Mo Blackwell fill in a little bit. It's not necessarily one that's heavy on coverage, right? That's a little bit more of Lafau's outside linebacker spot. You will have to cover at times, but there's a lot of things you'd say about David Benda's impact. Probably his weaker spot, although he did have a couple picks. I shouldn't critique Benda too hard there. Had a couple picks in his career, right? Will Howard. But that spot doesn't necessarily rely on being as coverage as much. So I think Trey Moore should be able to do that. Ty Anthony Smith, right? Someone who is growing as well. I'm really confident in this linebacker group, Chip. So that would be one. I guess if I had to give another outside of linebacker, I would say secondary as a whole, because I think there's just a lot of talent there. Maybe it's not quite as proven as what I think is, Anthony Hill and Lafau, but a lot of talent there. But yeah, Chip, I'm really high on this linebacker room, man. The duo of Hill and Lafau, I think they're going to be a wrecking crew this year.
Yeah. Yeah. In our roundtable, Eric talked about linebacker. I talked about quarterback because I think Arch Manning is certainly capable. He's going to need help, obviously. And then our man Hank South talked about the safety position with Michael Taff, Jelani McDonald, Derek Williams, of course, Xavier Filsaime, Jordan Johnson Rebel, and Jonah Williams. And Jordan Scruggs of Horns247 talked about the offensive line because Jay Scruggs is very high on Nick Brooks, who is a true freshman who's already in the 2 deep, possibly even as Trevor Goosby's backup at left tackle. Nick Brooks comes in at 6'7", 353. You'll take that. All right, let's move on to let's get to women's basketball. Sure. Because Rory Harmon has announced that she is returning. This is not a big surprise, as Eric mentioned. The money in the WNBA is not even as good as a solid NIL program. And this is interesting because you've got Brianna Preston, Rory Harmon, Madison Booker, all of whom can handle the point. It's great to have ball handlers. And we'll see. We'll see what Texas can add, because you get Layla Felia back from the eye, the detached retina. She was a 17-point scorer at Michigan. She's a 3-level scorer. You bring in Aaliyah Crump, who I think is, another 3-level scorer. You've got Jordan Lee, who, in my mind, outside of Madison Booker, is your only other 3-point shooting threat. You need players who the defense has to honor and respect. There were times where defenders were leaving Rory Harmon and leaving Shea Holly to go double team Madison Booker or double team the bigs, because they just didn't respect their outside shot whatsoever. So that's got to change, Eric, because we saw the national championship game between UConn and South Carolina. My God, everyone on UConn can shoot the three, even their bigs. So it just made it impossible to defend, and they blew South Carolina out of the gym. Texas has got to get there.
Forgive me, Chip, for looking around. I was trying to find, because it had said that it was announced in a release that Rory Harmon was returning. So I was trying to find the release, but it actually is a social media post. Go check it out. It is on, I believe, the Texas Women's Basketball X account. Pretty cool video with Rory. I think Rory has my hoodie on in the start of the video. I think she has the same hoodie that I have on, but nevertheless, pretty cool video where she's sitting down talking about her journey and her struggle, and she announced that she's coming back. So go check that out. But Chip, here's the thing. I think you made the first point I think is key. Getting Layla Felia back should really help things in that backcourt, right? For one, Layla is, and we're going to talk about this with the Texas men, an excellent perimeter shooter, right? So you're going to take some of the pressure off of Rory there. Two, let's not forget, Rory's game was never, if my memory serves me correct, I want to say the highest she shot from the field was something like 46%, right? Which is a solid number, but she was never, a sharpshooter from three, right? That's not really her game. On Rory's game, Chip, as you would attest, it was really, really rooted in being quick, being one of the faster players in college basketball, explosive, getting to the rim as a penetrator, and also playing excellent defense, right? Rory's averages for a career over 2 steals per game. So I think maybe the reason I'm cautiously optimistic is I think that coming off of the knee injury, and I know I'm kind of repeating myself here with what I said with CJ Baxter, another year, I think another year of getting comfortable being the player with a game like hers that's so rooted in explosiveness and speed, Chip. That to me, I think it will help her more than anything else. But to your point, this year, yes, teams did back off her. Shea Holly, her shooting numbers were down this year, right? Teams did back off of her a bit. And I think that while Vic wants to be an inside-out based team, right? He wants to get the ball down low to his post players, et cetera, et cetera. I think you have a little more of a threat from your guards in that sense, right? A little more of a threat outside of mid-range Maddie, who truly is the Kevin Durant of the women's game in that respect. She is a monster from the mid-range. So yeah, I do think that'll be interesting. But all in all, I think it's a great, great move for not just for Texas, for the benefit of Texas, also Rory as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jacqueline Mwenentanda, she's another mid-range monster, and she's got to reach a level of consistency in her confidence and in her, ability to let the game come to her. Because when Madison Booker went out with foul trouble in the Final Four game against South Carolina, you needed Jacqueline Mwenentanda to become Maddie Booker or do what she can do, which is get to spots in the mid-range and hit that little, kind of push jumper from the lane. She's so long, she's so capable. We saw her against Illinois in the NCAA tournament. She scored 19 points. It was effortless. She's very efficient as a scorer. She's just got to believe that she's that player and not defer, because she's a weapon. At 6'2" and how long she is, she can defend on the perimeter. She just needs to take her game up to that next level, because she could be a real weapon for that Texas women's team. All right, let's get over to men's basketball real quickly before we get to Texas baseball, which is now number 2 in the nation. Men's basketball, they pick up Matas.
We'll get that pronunciation, guy.
Thank you. Matas, the 7-footer from Florida Atlantic, Eric. So you've got Tremont Mark coming back. You got Jordan Pope coming back. Kendall Weaver coming back. Nick Cody coming back. Who else am I missing coming back? But you've added Dalen Swain, who I love, the 6'8", forward from Xavier, who he is a rising star, who's got 2 years of eligibility. And then the kid from Purdue, guess I should pull this stuff up before I start talking about it. But Eric, Sean Miller, and he's retained Chris Ogden, and he's bringing back Ulrich Malagi, who was an assistant coach under Chris Beard, who left to go to Kansas State, and as the associate head coach for Jerome Tang at Kansas State. He's now coming back to Texas with Sean Miller. Your thoughts?
All right, Chip. First off, Cam Hyde was the kid you were talking about.
Cam Hyde.
In Purdue. It's okay.
My good friend.
Listen, it's spring football, basketball, baseball. We got a lot of names in our head. So
a lot of names.
You get a mulligan there. Overall thoughts, I'll make it quick. We're going to talk about some take it or leave it. Still think they need a shooter, right? I wrote this. I felt that some of the players, most notably Jordan Pope, most notably Tremont Mark, they're going to fare. Their game should really be aided by a Trey Johnson type, right? You need someone that can allow those guys, when they can get open looks, and knock them down. In terms of Modis, it's interesting because he is not, I think, the natural inclination when you see a 6'10", 6'11", 7-foot European guy is you think, all right, stretch 4, stretch 5. He's not that. This is an old school 7-foot big. Okay. He's going to get the ball on the post. It's going to be interesting to see how he kind of, fares and works out in Sean Miller's up-tempo system. That was my first thing. I was like, okay, you got a traditional 7-foot, 240-pound big. How's he going to fare, running? Florida Atlantic under John Jackas, their pace, right, just number of possessions per 40 minutes, was actually faster than Xavier's last year, okay? So he's used to getting up and down the floor. I think the big issue with him is going to be 2 things. One, development, right? How does he go from playing in the AAC, which, no disrespect to the American, is not the SEC in terms of bigs, right? How does he go making that jump? And secondly, can he stay out of foul trouble? Average something like 2.7 fouls per game last year. In the SEC, with the skill level of these bigs and skill level of these guards to penetrate, that could be a foul higher, right? Fouled out something like 4 or 5 times last year. So those are the things I'm really interested with him. We talked about Dalen Swain, I believe, a little bit last week, so I won't belabor that point. But this roster is coming together, Chip. I'd still think there are a few more pieces that are going to be needed. And certainly, as we've talked about, this roster is going to be built through the portal this year, right? 25 is a wash in my mind. Maybe you can find a guy who, you get late and maybe get him out of their commitment, so on and so forth. But 25 recruiting is a wash. 26 recruiting, that's where I think you really have an opportunity to make your case there. So this team's going to be built through the portal. So I'll be interested to see what other additions they make.
Yeah, good stuff there. Texas baseball, number 2 after, look, they lose Max Ballou. We talked about this last week. Max Ballou, might make it back for the postseason, but done pretty much for the regular season. Adrian Rodriguez, their DH, third base freshman sensation, with an upper body injury, has been out. They did get Rylan Galvan back, and thank goodness, because Rylan Galvan has been amazing, and he hits the walk-off home run to sweep Georgia, number 3 Georgia, in Austin, and now Texas baseball sits atop the SEC standings with Arkansas. This is going to be a fun collision course looming out there in a couple more weeks. But Eric, this Texas baseball team they're connected, man. They are finding ways to win, and they're showing they can do it in different ways. And it's the pitching right now. If you look at the batting average for Texas, it's dropping, but the ERA is dropping as well. And the starting pitching has been fantastic. Jared Spencer coming off his best performance of the season against Georgia. Luke Harrison has been solid, but Schlossnagle has always backed him up with Max Grubbs, who's been amazing. And then, you get to Sunday and you've got rubber-armed Ruger Riojas, who just is like, yeah, give me the ball. Give me the ball. I don't care. I threw 100 pitches yesterday. Give me the ball. I'm good. And so you covered the team last night. They won 12-2 over Houston Christian, which leads the Southland Conference. This Texas team they won't die, Eric.
Listen, you talked about it, that the team's hitting, the batting average kind of coming down a little bit, which is expected, right? You're now in SEC play, but the team ERA is coming down. Texas had no problems with the bats last night. And Ethan Mendoza drives in 5 runs. Chip, what I'm learning in my first year actually covering Texas baseball is, man, there might not be a harder park in America to get the ball out than Dish Falk Field, right? A, with the winds, that makes it challenging. B, an unseasonably cool night last night. There were a couple balls that just died on the track that would have, or I shouldn't say died at the track, died at the wall, quite frankly, that would have gotten out in a more seasonably warm evening in the great state of Texas come April, right? So there is that. But no, to your point there, you got to love the way this pitching staff is responding, right? Especially after the struggles of last year with the pitching staff with the arms. Riojas, Cade Bing last night, quick update on him for those who may be wondering, left after an inning, just over an inning. Steve Sarkisian. Jim Schlossnagle said that, his fastball is coming out at 84. He's typically a guy who can hit 92, 93, 94. So just didn't like what they saw out of him. Made several mound visits, ended up pulling him. But that's where the depth of this pitching staff. Freshman Jason Flores. Who am I missing for last? I don't have my box score in front of me who all pitched. But there were quite a few names there. Grayson Saunier. Forgetting the other kid. Drew Rarick, right? Another freshman there. So plenty of arms there for Texas. And I think, again, you can't say enough about the job that Max Wiener's done with this pitching staff. Outgetters, and it's really showing its value here, Chip.
Yeah. We had an Aiden Moffitt sighting at the very end.
Yep.
The LSU transfer pitched a scoreless inning to close things out. And that's good. Tuesday nights need to be the night where Jim Schlossnagle can keep looking at the arms who haven't pitched as much to see if they're ready for prime time. But it's been amazing. The starting pitching has gone deep enough in games where they haven't had to go through 5, 6, 7 pitchers in a game on the weekend. And it's been amazing. My man, Dylan, the praying mantis Volantis, who just comes in and eats the competition with that lanky armed knuckle curve, has been fantastic. I mean, really, really good stuff. All right, Eric, I think kudos to Texas men's tennis. They win the SEC regular season title by winning at Texas A&M, which all but locks up the Lone Star Showdown Cotton Holdings Cup to Texas, who now leads A&M like 9-4 in sports. They need one more win to clinch it. You ready for some take it or leave it?
I am ready, Chip Brown.
All right. Well, then guess what? That's what we're going to do. All right. Who is serving first? Eric.
You would be serving to me, Chip.
Okay. Take it or leave it. Number 1, Eric, your biggest concern midway through spring football is the tight end position. Take it or leave it.
No, it's not my biggest concern. My biggest concern is development of Arch Manning, plain and simple, right? I think we can. I kind of alluded to this when we were talking about Arch earlier, Chip. We can think that he's a finished product. We can think we know what we have. You can, if you're a Texas fan. However, he is still a first-time starter who has all of 2 starts underneath his belt. I am more than positive that Arch will be a fantastic quarterback, but it is not a proven commodity yet. That is my biggest concern, Chip.
Okay. I like it. My biggest concern is defensive tackle. Because this has been such a good, positive plus position for Texas the last 2 years. It's allowed their defense to be one of the nation's best. It's allowed them to stop the run and force teams to throw it to against a really talented secondary. The news about, Travis Shaw having a chronic knee, that's not good. Cole Brevard, the Purdue transfer, has been solid. And Hero Kanu, the transfer from Ohio State, has been solid. But they're not at where they were each of the last 2 years. And if you can't protect Anthony Hill and Leonga Lafau, you're opening yourself up to getting run on, and that you're putting a lot on Anthony Hill. Let's put it that way, in Leonga Lafau. And you don't want to have to do that. You want to be able to use them however you want to dictate. And so I will say defensive tackle, my biggest concern at the midway point of spring football. All right, take it or leave it, number 2.
Take it or leave it, number 2, Chip. The biggest need for Sean Miller and Texas men's basketball and transfer portal is a perimeter scorer. Take it or leave it, Chip.
Yeah, I'm going to take this. We kind of talked about it, but you've got some options at point guard, Tremont Mark, Jordan Pope, and you've got to have someone who can help space the floor, because Dalen Swain is a guy you're going to want to feature. You're going to want to run stuff for. You want to give him some breathing room. You need to have a perimeter shooter who the defense has to respect. So go find me the best 3-point shooter you can bring in through the transfer portal, please. Eric, what say you?
I am inclined to agree, Chip. Listen, you could make the argument that point guard, I think that's going to be piecemeal this year. I think Tremont Mark will be a ball distributor. You and I have gone back and forth a little bit on kind of that point guard thing. Semantics, possibly. I think Tremont Mark will be a offense initiator. I think I said ball distributor. I think Tremont Mark will be an offense initiator. I think Jordan Pope will be an offense initiator, and they probably need another point, quote unquote, traditional point guard. But I think all of this thing really needs to come together with outside shooting, Chip. In today's college basketball, unless you're going to have dominant post guys or a dominant guard who can get in the lane and create there, you need players who can shoot the basketball. And right now, as you look at this roster, I think Jordan Pope's numbers will come back to maybe a little more what they were at Oregon State, and he'll be one of those guys. But they need someone who can consistently do it in the same way that a Ryan Conwell could for Xavier last year.
Well, and Sean Miller might use Jordan Pope as that shooting guard, and they might run stuff for him. And
Chip, you may not have seen this tweet where Jordan Pope responded to a fan who had like kind of a mock depth chart and had him at shooting guard, and Jay Pope said, "Hook him. However, move me to the left." So it could be maybe Sean Miller might have other ideas, but Jordan Pope sees himself cleared by that tweet as a point guard.
Okay. Well, Sean Miller, coach him up, baby. Coach him up. Put him in position to succeed. All right, let's get to take it or leave it. Number 3, Eric, the MVP of Texas's baseball season right now is Ethan Mendoza, second baseman, transfer from Arizona State. Take it or leave it.
I am going to take this, Chip. Ethan Mendoza sets the table for everything this Texas offense is able to do, what they have been able to do, and what they will be able to do in the future. I mean, just a Chip. for anyone who hasn't seen Texas baseball this year live, Ethan Mendoza is worth the price of admission. That guy at the top of the lineup, I want to be very clear. I'm not comparing him to this person. So please, please, please do not take this literally. I'm saying the impact that he has on his team in terms of setting the table is like an Ichiro, Chip, right? Like, you always are going to have someone on base, whether it's a single, an ability to drive someone in if the back half, the latter half of that order has guys on base and the lineup turns around. Love everything he brings. And he's a steady glove as well in the field. So I'm saying, yes, I will take this, Chip.
Okay. I gotta give some love to the pitching staff. So I'm gonna leave this, and I mean it's kind of a tie for me between Jared Spencer and Dylan Volantis. Dylan, the praying mantis Volantis, because when he was starting on Sundays, Dylan Volantis won, but he's been so valuable in closing out games because his release is different. The pitch is hard to pick up. He's got 7 saves, and he's fearless. It doesn't matter what position you bring him in, whether it's a bases loaded situation. The guy's impervious to pressure. Knock wood, because he's just been so good. He's so confident. Keith Moreland told me Dylan Volantis takes the mound and looks like he knows he's going to strike you out. And he said those were the pitchers you hated to face as a hitter. He's like, I was a pretty good hitter. I played 13 years in the major leagues. I hated seeing pitchers who looked like they knew they were going to strike me out. He said Dylan Volantis has that look. So that's kind of a cop-out. I'm giving co-MVPs at this point, but there you have it. All right, kids, what a loaded show here on the Flagship Podcast this week. Hope you had as much fun as we did. Thanks for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Horns247 YouTube channel so that we can continue to grow and so that you don't miss a thing. When you like and subscribe, it, gives you a little alert when we're doing our thing. And also feel free to give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcast. That would also help with the bosses. And make sure you join the Horns247 family with this incredible 50% off first year annual membership. Annual membership gives you VIP access to all the team sites on the preeminent 24/7 Sports Network. For Eric Henry, I'm Chip Brown. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Stay safe and keep the faith.